Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, back for another episode. And I've got a really great friend who I called up, and we were talking the other night, and we were talking about high-end salespeople. We were talking about, people who are now hiring. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to do what they call high-ticket closers. They're bringing people in for a weekend, and they're saying, "Oh, you're certified, go close," right? So we talk about that. Now I'm going to title this thing Moral Obligation in Marketing, because Dan is really skilled in marketing. He's had a couple of very good, successful companies. One was in the painting industry, and the other was actually in the training industry. And they built very quickly. They built up to a $5 million plus company very, very quickly, and sustained that for years. So I think you really get a lot out of this. Listen to the moral obligation component of this, the conversation. I introduced that later on, probably halfway through the conversation, but it's really what we're talking about. It's playing win-win, how to sell, how to get the right salesperson, and why you actually want to play win-win in the selling process as a company owner, or just in a way of just increasing your sales. So without further ado, let's go to the interview. Dan, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. Just interesting to see where it's going to go.
So for those of you listening, Dan and I have known each other for 20 plus years, and he was probably the hardest guest for me to get onto this show, quite frankly. And I wanted him to come on here because we've known each other for a long time, and Dan had some very successful businesses in the past. He has a very successful one now. You had a painting company. I know you had at least 25 employees in that company, and I know you built the next company to over 5 million or 5 million-ish. And you did that in a pretty quick period of time. And now you have a company called G7. And G7 is it a full service digital marketing agency? Is that how I'd classify it?
Yeah, digital marketing agency that's focused on increasing profits, from everything from leads all the way through to your offer and sales.
So those of you who are doing that and not doing that, I should say, especially you B2B folks out there, give him a look up. And I've known him for a long time. He won't let you down. I promise that. So Dan, we're plugging you right in the beginning of this thing.
Okay, perfect.
So Dan and I, we were having a discussion the other night, and it kind of got, I would say, more to a heated discussion on something we both feel very passionate and strong about, or passionately about, and it's hiring. And it's these people today that are promoting out people selling for other people, because there's a lot of companies now trying to do this. And Dan, you and I were talking about kind of the disservice that a lot of these companies out there are doing, and the reality of how they're doing it. It's more of a churn and burn model for clientele. So I really wanted to talk about this because I've actually had clients who have gone out and, tried to put a sales team together through some of these type of companies, and they've actually, it's not worked out well. So how do you feel about this whole thing regarding?
You just want to go right into the pain.
I want to go right into it.
Right? Right. Yeah. So one of the interesting things about this whole thing is when people outsource certain things. I get it. You got to start somewhere, right? Like everybody starts somewhere, learning a skill set, right? But when you're bringing in salespeople, right, or even certain personnel that are going to be frontward facing, representing your brand, representing you, right, you want people that actually have been through your stuff, like been through your, they're maybe a buyer or a customer of yours, or they're actually somebody that at least subscribes to and believes what you're doing, right? And what you're doing. The challenge with bringing outsourced people in, right, is just to sell, is they're only money motivated, right? So if they're only money motivated, you're going to get yourself into trouble and sign people up for things that they don't need to be in, right? And because these people are disconnected, right? It's really over, it's an overworked industry when you're bringing in these salespeople and you're seeing that like, they're not, that they just, like you said earlier, is like, there's this churn and burn model of just go through the numbers, right? And until you find the gold, right? And force, through a scripted process, getting people into stuff that they just have no sense, no rhyme or reason why they should even be enrolled in what it is you have to offer, right? Because they're being sold into something for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's kind of like somebody who's selling boats but never been in a boat in their life.
Right. Yeah.
First time they go out in rough seas, they don't come back.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So it's, I'm a big proponent about this as well. Now, I think you need not necessarily industry experience in this, but you need to be at least immersed in the product or service that you're selling.
Right.
And I think that's what you're saying, right? I mean, you can bring somebody in who has great sales experience. They'll still be able to sell some stuff, but are they able to really play win-win with the client? Because they don't know how to play win-win.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, and one of the things around that is, with the one client that you and I mutually work with that you got me involved with, right, is I believe in the product, right? I actually purchase the training every year, physically purchase it, right? Because I realize that if I'm not a buyer and a consumer, I don't see what the consumer sees, and I need to believe in it and actually experience it. And a lot of people won't do that, right? And I know I could get it for free and I won't take it serious. I won't value it, right? I won't actually go through it. I won't apply the things that I'm learning. And I think, a lot of that is like, if you're connected to the person in a way where you can, as a user, right, saying, yeah, I drive, it'd be like going to a Mercedes dealership and he's driving a Ferrari, right? And, the salesman is driving a Ferrari and he's trying to sell you a Mercedes, right? Right. It's like, there's a disconnect for that, right? Not there's anything wrong with him having a Ferrari. It's the fact that he's not actually, driving the vehicle that he sells, right? So I think a lot of times people get lost in that of like, trying to sell stuff for the wrong,
Well, it's interesting you bring up the Mercedes, because I went into a luxury dealership and they were actually driving, one guy was driving a Dodge and one guy was driving a Ford. Mm-hmm. And I asked them point blank, I said, why aren't you guys driving, what you're selling? Mm-hmm. And they say, well, we literally can't afford it. And I said to him, can you really literally not afford it? Or can you literally not afford to actually have this vehicle? Because when somebody like myself sees you in a vehicle that's literally not what you're telling me is the greatest thing, since four wheels hit the ground, it's not really a good rapport building process. I don't really trust you out. And I remember I had a client that was selling industrial equipment, but they also used industrial equipment in their manufacturing company. And I went into the manufacturing company and not one piece of what they sell was in their own manufacturing facility. And I asked them why. And they said, well, it costs us money to actually, to put new stuff in there. I'm like, how do you demo your products? He's like, well, we have another building. Like, how unethical, right? So it's, and Dan and I have a lot of experience in not only the training industry, but working B2B. And we do a lot of work in the training industry. And in the training industry, especially, I mean, that's really what I hear you saying is like, what? They're hiring people. They have no idea. They've never been in a business in their life, let's say, but they're hiring people to give business advice and to help a client play win-win to get to the next level. And they've never been in the situations that you've been in or I've been in regarding, business. And I think it's a huge disservice to people. So why do you think people do this? Why do you think people go out, they start these companies, they just like, hey, we'll train you to be successful. They churn and burn them. And why do you think the owners of the companies actually do?
I think that the big thing is greed, right? So of course there's I have a skill set. I can teach somebody something. And I think they may have the right intentions when they start, right? But then as it grows, right, and you start to experience, now I get it. Like not everybody's going to be happy, with every service they purchase or every product they, purchase, right? You could have the same exact product. You hate it. I love it. Right. Like like a Philadelphia Eagles jersey, for instance, right? Yeah. So,
you want to get into that one, don't you?
Right. So I had to throw that in there, right? So, but the reality is, they're out there selling stuff for the sake of making money, right? And they're not at the place yet where they're actually connected to like call it a bigger why behind it to actually help impact people. And when you serve people at the highest level through the sales process for the right reasons, right, the money will come, right? You'll figure that piece out, right? But if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, just to make money, and you don't have the skill sets, you've been certified to be a high ticket closer on a weekend, and now all of a sudden you're, fielding calls. Yeah, you got to start somewhere, right? But it's it's just not, it doesn't work for everybody. Like, I'm not saying some people that have a natural gift to communicate can work their way through and figure it out, right? But most people that are trying to follow a script, like I'm sure we've all been on scripted calls where somebody's asking the chain of questions that we know they're manipulating the conversation. I don't do well when I'm the recipient on those calls, right? Like if I made it to book a call, I literally, I'm in. Like I already know that this is something I'm doing, right? So don't take me through a script, right? Like that. Now, that to cover some stuff, but the problem is everybody's reading the same script, right?
Yeah. And here's, I think one of the biggest challenges with that, Dan, is the other person on the other end that's receiving it doesn't know they're part of the script.
Right.
The buyer, right? The buyer's like, and guys like you or myself or others who are very skilled at doing this, we can see that script coming a million miles away from us. Right. And we know we could recite the script if we needed to in a lot of ways.
Right.
So all it does is break trust. Because what people don't realize today, and you and I do a really good job at this. And again, guys, I'm plugging Dan for a reason. We've known each other for over 2 decades and worked together on several projects. Although he is an Eagles fan, a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I'm a New England Patriots fan. So, sometimes that doesn't always work out between us, but especially when the Eagles beat the Patriots. So the challenge with a script is really that we're taking somebody and we're removing the humanization and the personalization and the relevancy and the meaning out of the actual sales conversation. And most times this is, especially now with the pandemic, this is something that I find people have to build in, Dan. They can no longer rely on the routine because, well, quite frankly, the internet has changed sales, right? I mean, how, if you want to know something, how quickly a guy like you, especially highly technical, how quickly can you find pretty much any information on anything,
right?
Other than hacking into the FBI database or something, right? I mean, right. If you want something, and I know, because we have conversations on a regular basis, it's like, hey, I'm looking for this thing, and you'll send me information on that. I'm like, where'd you get this? Right. And you're like, oh, just like bing. So the challenge, I think, with people being scripted like this is it takes out that human to human connection. And that's what really people are more interested in the quality of life versus just being sold to. Do you find that as well?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big piece is like, really, why are you actually doing sales to begin with? Right. And, if it's only money driven, right. This is why, like, if you remember when you got me involved with the one deal that we still work on to this day, right. Yep. When you first called me about it, I said, I don't do that. I'm not a salesperson. Right. And you said, what are you talking about? I've seen you sell millions of dollars worth of stuff. Right. Right. And the reality was like, I've never it was like, yeah, I would hire people. I still was doing some of that stuff, but I never looked at it as sales. Right. So I still don't consider myself a sales person, yet I've sold millions of dollars worth of stuff. Right. But it's because I'm actually just really having conversations, right? And it brings up a conversation I had with someone the other day where they were like, "Well, I get the purpose of this call." They were trying to control the call, right? And say, "I get the purpose of this call is to get me to buy this program." And I said, "No, you're misinformed. Purpose of this call is to really see if you're a good fit for the program, and if we could actually help you get where you want to go, right? And if that's the case, I will invite you to the opportunity to be part of it. Right. But we're not there yet. Right. And I think, a lot of times when people, people always say is like, these, see if you're a fit calls are, disguised sales calls, right?
Right.
And they're not disguised. They're plain sight. It's a sales call, right? But it really is a fit call, right? To make sure if you're the right person, right? But it's not always the case in this industry when you're being pitched, by people that are not in the same, in the same scope of, being connected and communicating in a way that genuinely is serving the person that's the buyer, right? And taking yourself out of it. Like I'm sure I'm sure you teach this and you've done it, Doug, where it's like, detach yourself from the outcome, right?
Yep.
And that's a hard thing to do when you need to make money and provide for your family.
Dan, as you're saying that, my eyes are going up, right? And I'm like, I agree with you when you don't have enough leads.
Right. Exactly. But there's these pieces that where if you have enough people to talk to and you have the reps to put in where you can actually get better and better at communicating, right? And you're just driven because you want to help people with the thing you're offering, right? Then you'll have success, right? And the money will follow, right? But I think a lot of times people are being sold on the greed thing. When you asked that question earlier, is like they're being sold on, make a ridiculous amount of money selling, right? Without doing X, Y, Z, right? And the reality is, as well as I do, like that isn't happening overnight, right? And, unfortunately, it's getting people into trouble, right?
What you mean? I can't go to a 2-week course and know how to be in the top 1% of sales and do it ethically? What do you mean? I could. And the reason I'm saying this is you and I were talking about this the other night. It's like, people are going to a weekend class and they're certifying them as a a high ticket sales closer. Right. And firstly, they don't even know what high ticket is. I mean, they think high ticket's $5,000.
Right.
Right. And, you and we're used to selling hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even larger 7-figure projects. Mm-hmm. And then when they hear that, they're like, wow, that's just so big, comparatively. But you know what? Is it really? I mean, the gal or guy who closes, 60 jumbo jets for Delta Airlines. I mean, that's a heck of a lot bigger sale than you and I are doing on a regular basis most of the time. Right. So I can hear people now, Dan, going, oh yeah, that sounds all great, but this will never work in business to business sales. This is that's training industry, or whatever. Business to business is different. Well, you sell business to business. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, like I always like to say this, I had a guy a couple of years ago that ran a successful hedge fund, and he was selling a service to raise money for his fund, and he was also selling a mastermind, right, to teach people how to actually do it. But it was a small group; it wasn't some big, info type thing. And we got on a conversation, and he goes, "My people don't buy off of emotion."
Okay,
and I took a deep breath, and I was like, "Really?" I said, "Let me ask you a question. Why are you driven to share the knowledge that you have?" It's like, I want to help people not struggle financially. I said, okay. So out of the conversations that I've listened to that your people have had, they're not talking about the very thing that the person's coming there for, because they want to take control of their financial future. They want to take control of their investments, their retirement. Why? Right. And dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was like, okay, well, I get your point. Right. We are people, right, that run businesses, right? Not the other way around, right? And we all have our own motives and the things and desires that we want in our lives, right? Whether it be family, health, lifestyle, whatever the thing is for you, right? A lot of people aren't talking about that in the sales process, right? They just want to get right into it. Like, I actually personally struggled with this years ago when I was selling the internet stuff back when we first met. Probably it was like, I was so one-dimensional, business only. It was all about lead gen, right? I didn't have the skill sets to coach around, human psychology and why people don't do what the hell they say they're going to do, right? Right? Because it would baffle me, right? I was like, I just thought everybody did what they said they were going to do, right? Only to realize that's not true, right? And everybody moves at their own pace for their own reasons, right? And discovering that ultimately led me down the path to understand that, sales is sales, right? But at the end of the day, what does that person really want? Why are we in this conversation, right? What do they really want in their lives that I can actually help them with, right? Or at least point them in the right direction.
So years ago, when I used to work with Chet Holmes, Those of you who don't know him, he wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine. Chet used to talk to us about moral obligation. Moral obligation. Do you believe so strongly in what you're doing that for their benefit, they've got to consume it? And not just for our benefit, but for their benefit. And, it's interesting to me because you and I have known each other for a long time, but I'm going to title this podcast Moral Obligation in Marketing, because I know you in marketing, you do the same thing for your clients. There's a difference between leads and right fit leads. And so I've seen you over the years do this. You've even done it with me when I've asked you questions. You're like, why are you doing that, dummy? What do you expect to get out of this? Right. So there's always a professional return on investment and a personal return on investment that people are looking at. And you blend those both into the marketing side of the business. And then that just makes sales easier, really, when it comes down to it. Mm-hmm. And, Dan and I do some campaigns together. And the reality is we got a campaign going on, and I think over the last 4 years, we have averaged well over a 50% close rate for clients. And the reality, we've got a 70+% close rate going on thing that we were just doing.
Right.
And so how does that happen, Dan? Because I can imagine people saying, oh, yeah, right. Maybe that works in training, but it can't work across the board, can it? You can't really get those high close rates. To me, I'd be like, listen, it all begins with the customer journey, and it begins with the marketing side of this thing, and everything has got to be congruent. What do you think?
Yeah, it starts from the moment somebody sees an ad or some type of marketing material that's out there, that's, a clear message to that person that helps filter them and take them down the path to they ultimately make the decision to have a conversation or purchase the thing you have to offer. Right. And, obviously this company, they do a great job at positioning things, and occasionally some people squeak through that aren't in that, thing, in that realm. But the reality is, like, by the time you get to a conversation, right, the person is much more qualified, and they actually are a fit, most of the time, not always, right. Or, they could be stuck in scarcity around something. They could be having some challenges in their life that are holding them back from actually taking the next step to do the things that, they want to do. Right. But the reality is, you get to take that person down this path and help them discover why they actually want to do the thing that you want to do, that why they're there, right? Is, because if they've gotten that far, it's like, I always like to say is like, if not now, if not this, then what, right? Like, what else? Do you have a backup? Like, is there something else you can do if it's not this, that's going to help you get to the goals and the things you want to be able to get to, right? And most of the time the answer is no, right? And it's like, then it gets them to think about it. Right. So it's like, and that's not, obviously, me, I don't force people into things, right. I don't strong arm them, right. Unless there's a occasional few that I've done that with over the years where I just see they're totally stuck in it. Right. And it's really not it's really a great fit for them. And they're just, paralyzed. But the reality is, looking at this whole thing, right, of the sales process from start to finish, is, in order to increase your close rate, you have to have a killer offer, right? You have to have an offer that just makes it, ridiculous that, they honestly want to buy it, right? And they need to have a conversation, in this case, with the sales process. But on the front end, everything they see from start to finish is really important.
So how about the offer, Dan? Some people, they'll never reveal what the offer is until they have all these conversations. And then at the back of it, it's like, okay, here's our offer. Mm-hmm. Firstly, do you find that the way to sell, even B2B, whether it's B2B or B2C, I just bought a new home, right? And I go up to Home Advisor or whatever, and I put the let me create a new email address because I know I'm going to get spammed to death. But people will call me, right? And so when they call me, they're like, oh, well, geez, let's have a consultation. I will come to that location. Right. And I know what they're doing, right? Because they're trying to get there to close the deal at that time.
Right.
But what I have found to be more effective for these people and for most clients is just tell them right up front.
Right.
This is the range of what is this and that, right? And, but I'd like to dig and find out if this or that actually even fits for you. Is it a good fit for you?
Right.
So some people would call this negative selling, but it's really not reverse selling or negative selling. It's really being genuinely interested in the person and having that through the marketing. And I know you do this in marketing for other people, where you're generating interest for people, but you're tying in sales and marketing as one congruent process.
Right.
So how important do you think that is now for B2B? I mean, especially now, let's talk about, everybody talks about the pandemic. It's changed sales, right? Nobody will ever buy anymore. Sometimes people are telling me that. I'm like, seriously? What do you think about the congruency between marketing and sales and opening up what they're going to experience before they actually even get there?
Right. So I think, two of those things are, one is when I, think back to when the pandemic started, right? And so having the agency the way I had it, you had your clients that were like, spend more money because people are home, right? So they had the right mindset, right? Then you had the other people that went into scarcity thinking like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Let's just shut everything down and stay dormant, right?
Right.
Right. And, so part of this comes down to the mindset behind what you're doing, right? To reach people and the conversations that you get to have with people, right? If they're in a place where it's like, look, I want to have a conversation with somebody, but this person, is really not a good fit. Like if you look at the sales process here with what we're talking about, it's really just about getting to know the right people, right? And you're going to have some people, like you've probably heard this, right? Over the years, some will, some won't. So what? Right. Now, I used to be offended by that statement, right? Because I figure everybody wants what I have to offer, right? Right. But the reality is not everybody does, right? And it's a filtering process that you get to take them through with, in the sales process, and realizing that I can't, obviously do everything for everybody, right? But the mindset with what's going on in the world today, right, is people feel like, if you've learned anything from this last couple crazy years, right, is the simple fact that there are always solutions to a problem, right? There's always ways to create new ways. Like I jokingly sit here and think like, why were we not doing virtual events before 2 years ago? Right? We're traveling all over the country doing stuff all the time, right? Like now, granted, those, I missed that experience of live events, right? But this is what we have right now, right? And it works, right? And it actually reaches more people, right? So, just being open to having a new solution, right? Creating new solutions. There's always a way to figure something out, right? And you can reach people today with just about any, modality online with all the different platforms that are out there.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue. And then we could wrap up the going virtual now. I mean, we used to have a program, we used to call it Take It Virtual, right? Because when I was doing the stuff with Chet Holmes, for example, we would only do virtual. Well, I shouldn't say, maybe once or twice a year, we would go to a live event, right, to present. But we would drive radio ads, which would drive them into a queue, which we would then place them into a paid training. And then we would sell virtually in a what we called a webinar back then, right? Or a masterclass or whatever people want to call it today. And the reality is just that model alone, we were doing 2 or 3 million on the front end of the sales. And then we were doing upwards to 12 million per year, just doing that. So upwards to $15 million a year, just doing that virtually. And people were always like, how do you do it? So we would say, hey, let's show you how to build your company and take it virtual, right? That was kind of the game. So now everybody's trying this, right? Because they can't get a hold of people, like in the old ways, right? So, how do you think now, because you've been around, I mean, you built a $5 million plus company. And by the way, you just haven't sold millions. I got to correct this because I've known you and I've seen tens of millions in sales that you personally have done, never mind everything else you've done. So my guess is you're probably 100 million in sales over time.
Right. I stopped counting after I hit 100. I was just like, okay, I have no idea at this point. Right. So the reason I bring this up is because I hear a lot from people. They go, oh, this virtual thing is just coming in. And then after the pandemic's over, it's kind of over.
Like, we're not going to continue to do that. Could you impart your wisdom? I mean, you're dealing with companies now and doing all of this virtually.
Sure.
And helping them on the back end.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely, I think, a tolerance for a hybrid version of this, right? So, for those that want to meet in person, of course, there's benefits to that, right? But the reality is, with what we've got going on here today, in today's current environment, people get to meet this way. We're fortunate we have these tools, because I sit there and think, like, if this happened 10 years ago, like, we'd be using an old school phone, right? I was like, we'd be just teleclasses back to those days, right? right. But I believe that, the world has changed, right? I think if anything, a lot of people have realized that they don't have to go travel all over the place, right? I think a lot of people are also realizing, hey, I don't even want to be like going to an office anymore, right? It's kind of nice working from home, right? And I get more time. Now, some people don't like that. They want to get out and do their thing, right? But a lot of people I'm hearing say, like, it's kind of nice. I want to replace, like, I want to be able to work from home. I don't want to have to go back to the office and travel an hour each way and commute and save time. So I think, like, the hybrid version is here. It's going to be a combination of both, right? I think companies are actually realizing, especially larger companies, how much money they waste on all of that stuff, right? On the overhead of office space, the overhead of taking care of their employees back and forth, and all the others traveling all over the place. And I think a lot of them have realized how much money they've actually saved, right? Yeah. We're talking billions of dollars in revenue that's been saved, right? Because of not having to support a staff internally, right?
Yeah. In fact, I've seen a lot of large companies, they're not going back.
Right.
I mean, I was talking to a couple of insurance. I was looking for home insurance the other night, and I was talking to a couple of insurance agents that work for these large insurance companies. And one of them, I could hear little kids in the background, and the other one, I could hear a dog barking in the background. And so I was like, you guys working from home? Each one of them said, yeah. Oh yeah. And so they like it working from home. But I think what's happened is exactly what you said. These companies are recognizing, hey, we don't have to spend the money out that we were spending money out. So we're still getting the efficiency, and sometimes in some cases, even better productivity. And so that's increased our profit margins over time. So Dan, if anybody wants to get a hold of you on marketing, sales, to tell you that the New England Patriots are a much better team over time, how do they get a hold of you?
The simplest way is go to danielgiordano.com. That's DanielGiordano.com, and click on the schedule link if you want to have a conversation, quick chat, see how I could support you, point in the right direction. And then, of course, you can check out what I do there.
So any final words of wisdom besides the Eagles rock and the Patriots don't?
Well, both are not in the playoffs, so neither one matters, right?
That's true. This year is very, very true.
Yeah.
So, well, Dan, I thank you for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Check out Dan's website, connect with him. He's an ethical guy. I've known him for a long time. We hang out together every once in a while. Our families get together. So he's a good guy. Regardless of his sporting affiliation, I still think highly of him. And if you're looking for, doing something online or something of that nature, Dan, I'm going to plug you again, because I've actually passed you to many clients that I've had over the years, and it's worked out well for them. So give it a shot. And thanks for listening to another episode. And Dan, thanks again for being here. Hey, was that good or what? So I've known Dan for a lot of years. We tend to have a really good rivalry on on a lot of things, but certainly on the sports thing. But what I really wanted you to catch on this is what is your moral obligation? Why are you doing this? Why are you hiring people? Are they consumers of your product or service? In other words, are they just salespeople coming in? And, they're reflecting poorly upon your company because people know that they're not actually consumers of actually what you have or what you do. Believe it or not, it makes a big difference. Now, certainly, can you have a sales team? Certainly. Can you have a sales team that you train? Yes. But the reality is when they're consumers of the actual product or service, they're actually going to have understanding of it intimately, and they'll be able to talk in a different way than other salespeople can. So hope you enjoyed that interview. Do me a favor, as always, subscribe to this podcast if you like it. And if you want to do me a double favor, subscribe and actually put up a review for me. I would really appreciate that. As always, if you have content that you want to hear subject matter about, contact me and send that in. We'll take it under review. And if it makes sense, which a lot of times it does. So a lot of these subject matters that I'm bringing forth, even subject matter like this, is because it is suggested. So this podcast is here to help you get to the next level, put your company and yourself in the top 1% of sales globally. And I'll be happy to do that. Once again, this is Doug C. Brown. If you want to reach out to me directly, please do so. You can get me at Doug at Business Success Factors. You can also get me at Doug Brown 1234. You want to see more of what we do, go to businesssuccessfactors.com or the CEOsalesstrategies.com. Again, Doug C. Brown signing off with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Go out, sell something, do it ethically, do it morally, play win-win, and make some money this day.